My name is Mary Frances Hornsby Greer. I was born in. Are you going to take a picture?
I'm videoing Mrs. Greer, if you don't mind.
I was born in June of 1911, just down the street in our family home at 706 West Street, to Edna Earl Thomas Hornsby and Thomas Jefferson Hornsby Jr. They were pioneer families in Decatur County's Green Shade community. I had one sister, Martha Norton Hornsby, who many of you may have known. Anybody know Martha? No? Nobody knew her in the other group either. She married Idas Lynn and lived in the family home on West Street for many years. My daddy started working as a teenager for Southern Railway in Macon, and after he married my mother Edna, they moved to Bainbridge, where he started working for GF&A Railroad, which later became Seaboard Coastline. My father spent 53 years as a railroad man, retiring in 1950. My mother was a graduate of Young's Female College in Thomasville. She was known for providing beautiful flowers to the church and to shut-ins. She held every office in the Women of the Presbyterian Church that there was, and she enjoyed making baby clothes that the local babies wore in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. I graduated from Bainbridge High School and went on to finish Southern Business College and LaSalle Business College in Miami, and received credit for courses in the business department at the University of Miami. My first job was in the county agent's office. This was in the midst of the Great Depression, and the government made farm loans available that were called emergency seed loans. These were handled in the county agent's office, and it was my job to write up the applications. After a few years, the Production Credit Association, that's the PCA, was formed, and at first it was handled in the same place. After about a year, I was made the secretary-treasurer of that organization. In 1936, I was transferred to Miami as the assistant secretary-treasurer of a much larger PCA and 7 farm loan associations. It was in Florida that I met my future husband, and I was married in 1937 at the First Presbyterian Church in Orlando to Dolph Aird Greer. He was better known as Doc. Doc was a native of Cartersville, Illinois, but his mother was a sickly woman, and they moved a lot in his first 8 years of life before they finally settled in Miami. Doc attended schools there and went on to the University of Florida. When I first met him in Miami, he told me that he was working to save money so that one day he could farm. So in 1939, we purchased part of my grandfather's estate on Highway 97 South, and were able to move back to Decatur County in 1942. At that time, the highway was not paved, there was no electricity available, and it was 10 years before we had phone service. The war was on, and it was a rough time for all of us. After the war, Doc built our little home on the farm. Many of you will remember our quaint little white house with the big windmill. We did a lot of the work on building that house ourselves. I was working in Bainbridge, and Doc would work on the farm and work on the house all week. On Saturdays, I would paint what he had built. At that time, you couldn't borrow money to build a dwelling on a farm, so we had to build just what we could pay for on a 30-day account and our savings. It was not a joke when we finally moved in on April 1st, 1950. Doc was raising registered Jersey calves, and after the house was built, he built a very modern dairy, a milking parlor, and all of a sudden, we were in the dairy business. We lived in our small house for 7 years, and then we doubled the size of it. Again, Doc did the building, and I did the painting. After 10 years, Doc was told that he either had to double the size of his dairy or quit. Since it was hard to find help with the size it was, we were scared to tackle doubling the size of the dairy. So we sold our cows and moved on. We then planted the farm, except for the pecan grove, in pine trees. And Doc came to town to work the last 14 years of his life as the tax assessor for Decatur County. And our home sat among the pecan trees on 97 South until the new owners of the property tore it down a few years ago. Now you might remember, if you came down 97 and you pulled into our pecan orchard, there were deer by the droves, and you could shine your lights and just see deer after deer after deer. And then one time somebody came down there and shot at one of the deer. And then from then on, we had, people that kind of patrolled it and protected the deer because we didn't want them hunted. Anyway, I digress. I was working in Bainbridge right here in the county school superintendent's office, where I was an accountant in charge of the food service program for the final 23 years of my career. I was very active in our church, the First Presbyterian Church, where I was a long-time Sunday school teacher. I continued the work of my mother, providing flowers in the church each Sunday for 50 years. I always adored learning about and preserving history, and I served as historian at that church for many years. I was treasurer of the Board of Trustees of Green Shade Cemetery and member of the DAR and the Eastern Star. In our church, Doc served as the Board of Elders and the Board of Deacons, and one term as Sunday school superintendent. Doc was also a 32nd degree Mason and was known for his witty, good-natured, and jovial laugh. He died in October 1974, and I followed him in death in July of 1996. We're buried next to each other at the Green Shade Cemetery. Now, does anybody happen to know what I have in my hand? Anybody recognize this? It's a jar of blackberry jelly. Now, anybody ever get any of this from me? I used to make blackberry jelly. I would ask the ladies in the church to bring me their baby food jars, and I would make blackberry jelly for all the children in the church. So if you happen to have been a Presbyterian at any point in time, you probably got a jar of jelly from me. Blackberry, that is. Anyway, back to the cemetery. We have a daughter, Ellen Greer, who only lived a day, that's buried there in the cemetery with us. Doc and I were blessed to have a son, Thomas Hardy Greer, born in 1943. Tommy was such a joy to us. He attended Bainbridge schools and was an active Boy Scout, receiving his Eagle Award in 1955 with 31 merit badges. Later, he was awarded a Bronze Palm and a Silver Palm to the Eagle Award. He was awarded the Silver Award in Explorer Scouts. This was the last award of this kind made in the world. These two are the equivalent of being a double eagle. In 1957, he became the first Gentile boy in Decatur County to receive the God and Country Award in Scouting, and continued working with Explorer Scouts until he went to college at Troy University. Tommy married Jane Beard in 1970. They gave me my 4 wonderful grandchildren, Marguerite, Rebecca, Elizabeth, and Thomas II. It was a good life. I loved this town and the many, many people I knew over the years. But I'm going to let you go now. But